Okay, welcome back. It's day two. It's a little less than 24 hours. It's a little warmer than I thought it was outside. But this is the dough. It was out in the garage, kind of in a chilled environment overnight. And as you can see, it's really grown quite a bit. So last night when we put it away, it was about here. So it's about tripled in size, which is really what we're looking for. So time isn't as important as the growth of size. So if yours hasn't really grown and it's cold outside, that's okay. It's okay you can work with the dough if it's about this size. But this is really what we're looking for, some ideal growth. I've had it in the summer where this really would fill up this bucket. And that is probably, I let it go a little too long. So this kind of tripling of the amount of dough that you have. And if you take a look at the inside here, you can see we've got it's nice and bubbly, and it's nice and smooth. You got some big bubbles in here, and that's the yeast kind of doing its work. So what we're gonna go over today is shaping the dough, taking it out of this bin here, shaping it and proofing it, which is a second rise that takes place after the shaping in the proofing baskets. So these are, I'm going to show you a couple different techniques for shaping. Both are going to be to shape boules, so the rounded loaf that we showed. These are proofing baskets or bannetons. If you have them, great. You can use them with or without these linen inserts. I generally use the linen inserts. I've actually never tried it without them, but I have a friend that does, and he says it works great. So I've put a lot of flour in here. You can use rice flour if you have it. I hear that kind of helps to get the bread out. Sometimes the dough will stick to the linen insert if you don't flour it pretty heavily. So instructions you'll read will say like lightly flour, but every time I've done that, it's been stuck to the side of the linen. So we'll throw some flour in there last minute, but I kind of season these, I guess, and I've used them enough that they repeatedly, they kind of have some built up flour. So to get this flour out of here, or to get this dough out of here, I sprinkle a little flour around the edge. And this is gonna be kind of wet and sticky to work with, so it takes a little getting used to. I put a little bit of flour down on my board or whatever you're working with. And then I have this bench scraper. It's really handy if you have something like this. This came with these baskets, I think, when I ordered it. It's just a cheap little plastic scraper, but it's super helpful. And you're gonna wanna have your hands lightly floured for this too. So if you come in a little closer. So what I do is I kind of loosen the dough all around. I grab it, I scrape just with this scraper around the edge. The fact that it's a little chilled actually helps because the dough kind of sticks together a little bit more. And the goal is to just kind of gently as you can, scrape the dough out and onto the table. So once you get it onto the bench here, you'll see, and you can see all the nice bubbles and all the stringiness of the gluten and the structure of the dough, but you can also see that it's pretty moist. So we'll set that aside. And if you remember yesterday, I said that this dough is enough for 2 loaves of bread. So what we're gonna do is divide it into 2 different pieces, and then we'll shape it. So when you divide it, what I would do is I kind of sprinkle down a little bit of flour down the middle, and then I just take my dough knife here and I cut it. And so now I just kind of eyeball it in half, and that's about two different loaves. And so I'll show you these 2 different techniques. They both start the same, and they kind of end up with basically the same shape. So what you're gonna do, and again, this is a little moist, so you're gonna wanna have flour on your hands, is you take and grab a little piece and just lift it up, and it's gonna have some tension, and then you just bring it into the middle like this. And then you kind of work your way around. Grab and lift, and you kind of grab underneath, and you can use your scraper to get it off if you need to. Grab and lift, and then I just kind of hold it in the middle here. It doesn't look very pretty, but trust me. So grab and lift, and then you just kind of ball it up, and then take your scraper and flip the whole thing over. Okay, so now you've got like a loose ball. And so then what you're gonna do is, with some flour on your hands, and you may need to keep reflouring your hands as you do this, you can either just take and pull it, and it helps if it's on a surface that isn't too overly floured. and you kind of pull it into a ball, and you just kind of twist it about 40 degrees every time you pull. Just rotate it a little bit until you start to get into this more tight ball shape. If you're working the dough like this and you find that it's too sticky, you can use a bench scraper with a little bit of flour on it and just slide it underneath and kind of use it to pull. And I just kind of work it around, and you really don't need to do it that much, but I generally try and get it into a nice tight ball, and you'll see that the skin is kind of formed on this dough, so you can touch it and your hands don't stick to it, and it's getting some bubbles. And now there's a couple different ways to go here. This is kind of a bit of a choose your own adventure thing. If you have a razor or a lame, I feel like it should be pronounced lame, but lame, which is a knife that you can use to score your bread, then you can put this in a certain way so that it'll be smooth. But all the seams of those folds are now on the bottom. And in the forkish book that we talked about, if you put that in the basket like this, when you flip it over, all those seams will be on the top, and then as the bread rises and bakes, it will just crack open at those seams, and you get a nice kind of artesian look. So that's one way to form the dough. So I'm gonna take a lint-free towel and throw this over here. If you don't have a banneton, you can use a bowl, just like a plastic bowl or a glass bowl, with one of these lint-free towels or some other lint-free kitchen towel in it, and you can flour the towel and get the same effect. And then you're just going to want to cover it. And this one is going to sit for about 4 hours, and it should be ready to go after that second rise. So now let's do this other one, and I'll do it in a slightly different way. It starts off the same. Let me throw some more flour down here. And grab this dough and bring it over. Okay, so it starts off the same. You lift and pull and lift and pull and lift and pull and lift and pull, and you shape it into a nice ball. And I'm coming back over here to a spot on the table where there isn't that much flour to shape it. And I'm gonna get this into a nice medium tight ball. And again, I'm just kind of dragging my fingers on the table and pulling it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do this with a pre-shape. So here's one. So essentially this is shaped just like that other one. And I could put it in the basket and let it rise like this, but I'm gonna do one other step that I've actually gotten some pretty good results with. So I'm gonna cover this and let it sit for about 10 minutes, and then I'll come back to it and we'll pick this up. Okay, so it's been a hot 10 minutes, and this is gonna look pretty similar to what it looked like when we left it. Just gives it a chance to rest so you're not like over handling the dough. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now, and this is just a different shaping technique basically, is I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of flour on the top, and then I'm gonna take my bench scraper and flip the whole thing over. Then with some lightly floured hands, I'm gonna grab kind of the back third of this and lift it up and let it just kind of droop down to the table. So I'm just gonna let it go, and it's gonna open up a kind of a fresh, you can kind of see that it'll open up a seam of the fresh dough. You might need to jiggle a little bit just to get it going. You don't want it to tear, so you wanna be gentle here. Starting to go, you can feel it go in your hands, and then once it gets down to the table, you can kind of set it down. And then you can pull it a little bit if you need to from this side too, just to get it a little longer. So essentially what we're doing here is we're taking the top third and rolling it back on itself here, and then I'm gonna take that whole thing and roll it back again. Then I rotate it just a little bit, and on this seam side up, I'm gonna take the whole thing and roll it up on itself again. So roll, roll, roll. And you can see here, we're kind of back at where we were. And that second shaping just gives the dough a little bit more structure. You can leave it a little rectangular. It's a little more tight right now and a little bit stronger. And we'll see if that makes a difference in our rise. Okay, so now with this one, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put it into the banneton upside down. So I'm gonna sprinkle a little more flour in here. a little more flour on top of this guy. Oh, that was a little bit too much, but you can brush this around and that'll make it a nice white when you see what we're gonna do later when we bake it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this whole thing and I'm gonna put it in seam side up into the banneton. So we'll let that go in there. Both these together will proof for about 4 hours. And I'll show you how to check that in a little bit. But we'll come back to these at room temperature. They're gonna be here for about 4 hours and we'll come back to them and check them. And then we'll be ready to bake. And I'll show you how to set up the oven and what we need to do to get a good bake. All right? Okay, so it's only been about 3 hours into the proofing period. Again, the bread is here. You can see visibly that it's kind of risen up. I just wanted to show you one thing. So when you're trying to determine whether or not your bread is ready to bake or whether it's perfectly proofed, I just wanted to give you an example of what it means to be underproofed. So this loaf here is risen. You can obviously see that it's risen, and you might be thinking to yourself, oh, okay, it's good, it's ready to go. So there's a thing called the finger dent test where you push in your finger, a floured finger, into the dough, and you use that to judge whether or not it's ready to bake. If it's ready and fully proofed, you'll push in a little bit and then the dough will leave a small finger dent. If it's not ready, it'll push right back out. So I just wanted to give you an example. So I got my floured finger here, and you basically just poke the dough and you see it comes right back out just like a balloon. And that means that it's underproofed. So this dough is not yet ready to go in the oven. So again, we're planning for about a 4-hour proof. So about another hour, and then we'll try this again, and hopefully I'll be able to show you what it looks like when it's ready to go. All right, thanks. Okay, so this bread has been sitting here for about a little over 4 hours, maybe 4.5. And as you can see, it's risen significantly. If we do the flour dent test on this, or the finger dent test, we can see that it's much slower to come back now, and there's a little bit of a divot left in the bread. So I'll do that one more time just so you can see it. So you see how slow it is to come back, and it leaves that nice finger dent. So that is bread that is ready to go. This next step, we got to be very careful, and it happens quickly. So I've put a cast iron Dutch oven into the oven, and I've heated my oven up to 500 degrees. You're gonna have to learn the characteristics of your own oven. It really depends on what your temperature is, how it heats up, and what it does. The oven here, I do 500 degrees, and then I move it down to like 493, 494, which I know is very specific on convection. So I heat everything up on the regular oven, and then I change it to convection when the bread goes in. Like I said, you just got to figure out your own oven. So have to be very careful. These things are very hot, so I have these kind of heavy-duty silicone oven mitts. So it's very easy to burn yourself, so please just be very careful. So I usually take the Dutch oven out and set it on the stove here, open. You can see that smoke is just old flour burning off. And what I like to do is put a little bit of flour on the bread, dust my hands. This is the one that we are not gonna cut with the razor. I'm gonna flip it over, and you can see it's got lots of flour, but that's all, like I talked about, to prevent the sticking of this banneton. And I'm just gonna take the whole thing and very carefully set it inside here. Put the cover back on. And then let that cook for 30 minutes. So that's gonna be in the oven for 30 minutes before I take the top off. We'll check it at the 30-minute point, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes, and we're just gonna check real quick to see how the bread is doing. And we're gonna remove the lid from the Dutch oven. Oh, and it looks like we got a fantastic rise. I'm just gonna leave that in there. That rise is really nice. I actually wanna turn that so that we get even heating around, and we'll put that back for another 20 minutes. and it should be good to go. Okay, so this bread looks like it's ready to come out of the oven. Ooh, looks good. Let me set it down. So I usually grab this and put it on a cooling tray. Now, that may look dark to a lot of people, but that's what really gives you the flavor in the crust, is this nice dark kind of crust. And that is the bread. So in a few seconds, we'll get the other one out of the fridge. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I put the other loaf in the fridge when it was ready to proof, and a little bit before I put this one in the oven, I put the other one in the fridge. That's fine. I'll take it out of the fridge. I'll flip it. I'll show you how I score it for a different kind of approach, but you can see that this is the one where the folds kind of cracked open in the oven when it rose. The other one will score explicitly, and we'll give it a chance to crack along the score and the design that we make. But that is loaf number 1. So again, with this loaf, one of the other things I wanted to let you know is I talked about how it's dark. You're really going to be tempted as a beginning baker to pull your bread out of the oven before you get this kind of color. It's going to be light, and it'll be fine. It'll be great. It'll be like a nice tan color, a nice like normal kind of store-bought bread color, and you'll enjoy it and you'll like it. But when you start to let it go and get dark like this, that is really going to push the flavor of the bread. You're really going to get a difference in flavor between the crust and the crumb, and I'm telling you, you're going to really like it. So resist the temptation to take it out too soon, and even if that means there's little like charred edges here and there on the bread, that's okay. It's going to be amazing. I just want you to know. Okay.
Here are some examples of bread that could be darker.
Okay, so this is the other loaf here. So this is the one with the seams on the top, which means that it's smooth on the bottom. And so what we're going to do with this one is we're going to score this one with my bread lame here. So if you don't have one of these, it's just a razor blade with a little curve in it. So you can use a razor blade. I've never tried to use a very sharp knife. It takes a sharper blade than you would think to do this. So the other procedures are the same. I've still got the pot reheating in the oven, so we'll go ahead and take that out because all of this happens very quickly, kind of once it starts. So I'll take the pot out. Just have it ready like we did before. Then I'm gonna flour my hands again. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on top of the bread here, and we are going to flip this over. Now if you really want a nice design, what you can do is you can take and smooth all this flour out on top here like this and get it nice and white all around. And then you can take your lame and you can do one big deep cut in the middle. Don't be afraid while you're cutting. Make sure you get a good deep cut, and then if you want, you can make some nice designs on the side here, and this will make like a nice wheat kind of shape in the bread. I'm gonna make sure those cuts are nice and deep, and then we're gonna pick it up just like before and carry it carefully and set it in the pot, and off we go. Now it's the same as before. Take a look. Oh yeah, that's good. Okay, this one. There is loaf number 2. Again, these are really hot, so you need to have good silicone. And that's it. Those are the 2 loaves of bread. I hope you've enjoyed following along, and hopefully you enjoy your bread and it comes out great. And if not, we can keep working on it. So thanks. Okay, so this is our second loaf, our final loaf. I hope it turned out just the same. I've been told by my producers that this set of videos was not sufficient for either children or beginners, and that I need to record something else that describes in more specificity how yeast works, how bread works, how fermentation works, and all these different things. So maybe we'll be doing that sometime in the future. I will keep you posted. Just keep an eye out for the link. And again, thanks everybody for paying attention.